Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. We'll get started. And as people join, um, as I had mentioned, this is being recorded. And this is actually our very first webinar through the First Nation Métis Inuit Education Association of Ontario. So we are really excited to try this new way of sharing information out. We hope to be offering more webinars moving forward throughout the remaining of this year and into next year. So we also want to acknowledge that the Ontario Teachers Federation is providing us their platform, which is why it shows up as Curriculum Forum. So as a subject association, we are part of the Ontario Teachers Federation Curriculum Forum. And so we acknowledge that they're allowing us to use Zoom. So just a few things, which it seems to be everyone is doing a great job, just to keep your video off. This also helps with connectivity and delaying sound and video, or in this case, the sharing of information on our screen share here. We do have the ability to put you on mute, but if you wanted to come off mute, you do have that ability, but we do recommend that you use the chat box to communicate. We do have people monitoring the chat box. And if you're unable to hear or see the screen, just to let us know in the chat box and we will try and troubleshoot that for you. So as I mentioned, our subject association, our main purpose is to provide support and resources for those who are teaching Indigenous education, which is now become mandatory, particularly in grades 4 to 6, 7, 8, and 10. Eventually, it will be coming online at some point. And of course, this began through what was originally called Native Studies. So I'm just getting a message that some people can't hear. And if you could use the chat box to just let me know if you can hear. Okay, so for those who are having issues with hearing, it's probably going to be on your end. So maybe check your volume and hopefully you can get it sorted out on your end. I'm glad people are able to respond that they can hear. So I'll just continue on. So as I was saying, so we did start out as in supporting Native studies and Native languages curriculum when it first came out in 1999. And I'm sure most of you know, it's undergone recent revisions. So we continue to provide resources and support in advancing Indigenous education across the province. And what we're most proud of is our work is guided by our Elders Advisory Council. And this Council of Elders, almost all of them are fluent language speakers and residential school survivors. And they basically vet our work and guide our work in terms of setting goals and directions in what they want to see happening in regards to education. So this really is important, obviously, in making sure that what we provide and put out as an organization is approved through this council. So I'm just going to move into our actual slideshow for today's topic. Okay, so Tisa is also on the line with me. And Tisa, if you can unmute, are you there?
Hello, everyone.
Okay, great.
I'm here.
Awesome. And also, who's helping to moderate and will also be sharing is my hubby, Kevin. So we'll introduce ourselves in a moment. Are you doing this one, Tisa?
I will do it. Yes.
Okay.
So we've done a couple of webinars over the last few weeks for our OWECTA union. And it's a real pleasure to be able to do one for FNMI EAO and through OTF, so miigwech to OTF for giving us a platform. But we felt it was really important to showcase one of the resources that FNMI EAO, the First Nation Métis Inuit Education Association of Ontario, um, Educator Association has created. One of the resources has recently we created is a great supplement to the new curriculum. So we wanted to make sure we showcase our unpacked it a bit. So our learning goals for this webinar is that we're going to take a look at that and then provide examples of how to use this resource in online classrooms. Okay, so in any of the professional development that I do as a lead in my board for Indigenous education, I always situate myself. It is super important for educators to constantly on where they come from and the lens that they project into the classroom. So I have up here on the left-hand side, I have a map. Muskrat Dam is written down there, and there's another location point, which is down by the Manitoba, Ontario, Minnesota border, and that is Onegaming First Nation. And then the other round dot is Thunder Bay, Ontario. So I am from all of those places, including Gitchinamegazip, which is just slightly to the right of Muskrat Dam. So where the A would be, I think, in the word Muskrat Dam right there. Thank you, Jody. Um, that is where my maternal ancestors come from. But my paternal family is from Onegaming First Nation, which is down near the U.S. border. And my father is Ojibwe, my mother is Oji Cree from the north. But I've been living here in Thunder Bay for about 21 years now, I guess. Um, Came here to go to school, finish my degree, and we were blessed with a young a little baby, and we've had to stay here since to make sure that he got the care he needed growing up. But on the right is a picture of Muskrat Dam, which is my husband's home community, which we consider home as well. And it's a fairly small community, but it's very grounded in their traditional land-based knowledge and spirituality. You can go forward, Jody. So we felt it was important to start off with a reflection piece. to make sure that teachers are constantly situating themselves and understanding where they come from um, when they're working with Indigenous education. This is Indigenous Knowledge Identity Circle, which was learned from a past woodland artist, Roy Thomas, and he was talking about. He had talked about you know these four quadrants of a life, and and for a person to really truly reflect on where you come from and where are you going. Um, these quadrants are right now in the shape of a medicine wheel, and um, we have to be careful that we don't appropriate the shape of a medicine wheel or the idea of a medicine wheel as Anishinaabe ways of knowing and being. It is not Anishinaabe ways of knowing and being. Sorry, I'm seeing that I am not. I'm not. Can you not hear me? Okay. Um, I'll speak a bit louder. I'm just seeing from the group chat that I'm not as loud for some people. But with this slide, um, so we have to make sure that we're not appropriating uh, uh, appropriating images that represent Indigenous knowledges and way of knowing and being. So the medicine wheel is something that is quite common as a is a symbol that would represent our ways of being, but it actually is something that we have adopted from our cousins from the West. Um, but we're going to use this symbol right here to organize our ways of thinking and being um, for this presentation and for this way of reflecting on who we are. So um, one of the um, one of the points that is really important for us as educators is to remember, if anything I want you to remember from this is the 2C, 2L. So the community culture and the land and the language. So we start always in the East. And what culture do you have? What land and language do you have? Um, where do you come from? What is your community? What beliefs and values do you have? What land and language? All of us come from a place. And what does that place do to show who you are as an educator? And then we move down into the southern quadrant, which is where have you been? What are your lived experiences? Have you come from a place of privilege? Have you had a home that has food and electricity and running water? Um, or have you come from a place where you have had to go without a lot of those um, luxuries, which they really are? And then where are you now? What is your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state? Um, I have been, a child who is a product of two, or a child of two two parents who were survivors of the residential school system, and so I've lived with that legacy. We lived with that for a long, long time, and it has impacted where I am now. Um, in my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state. It has impacted me tremendously. And then where am I going now? Where am I going? I am knowing that my experience as a child and a student has been really challenging. And I have had exceptional educators that basically kept me alive. Um, and so then I knew after that experience with them when I was alternative education in high school that I needed to do different. I needed to become a teacher so that I could do different. And that's where I'm going to do things differently and to empower and build capacity in my colleagues and support their professional learning so that they can um, have a better understanding of where many students like myself come from. You can move on, Joe. So it was super important. So the previous slide is something that I've used with a lot of professional development that I have done with teachers in my board. And having teachers reflect on their own personal experiences, which is critical to the work that we do in Indigenous education. Um, if we are not able to reflect and situate ourselves um, appropriately, then we could potentially be causing harm in our classrooms and learning spaces in our schools. So really, really important that as educators, we recognize where we come from and the lens that we bring into our learning space. Once we are able to do that, then we can take that circle of identity and transfer it into onto a student, and that would be so um, um, it would be so beneficial to creating a safe space for student learning and to support development and support for students. So my apologies for saying things over and over again, but it's really important that we recognize the lens we come from, and then um, taking that reflection piece and recognizing where we come from and the power and privilege that we bring to a student learning, and then transferring it into the classroom, and then reflecting on a student and um, where a student might be coming from, and particularly students that maybe might be more challenging to engage in learning or in attending school. So we can move on, Jody.
So, as Tisa mentioned, when we were discussing about how to model what we do in our professional development and in our work environments. So, for myself and my husband here in our picture, so this is us and our 5 girls, and our oldest is actually ready to give birth any moment now, right in the middle of a pandemic, and our hospital has an outbreak, and it looks like I may have to deliver her baby with just a midwife. So talk about going back to how it was. But anyway, our family story is we didn't know growing up, and this is connected to my husband's side as well. So we didn't know growing up about our connection to being Anishinaabe. My other ancestry is Irish, and our Irish ancestors came here in 1804. So I wouldn't necessarily say we are connected into an Irish culture either, but we didn't know growing up. And so, we grew up as your typical, white family in a small town. And it wasn't, so it wasn't until finding out our story, which was impacted, of course, by the 60s scoop, and which is now known as the millennial scoop. And that interrupted our family. And so my grandmother wasn't raised with her family. And so we've been in the process of connecting back and learning more about that. And so today we've been adopted into another family, and our kids all have their names. We take our clan role and responsibilities. So our family is Beaver Clan. So anyone who knows me is probably could explain my work ethic, which is insane. But anyway, it's also really important to recognize when we talk about privilege that I have to be very aware that I navigate the world through, through my experiences growing up. And it's going to be very different than, say, Tisa's experience. So as she mentioned in that wheel there, I grew up with running water. I grew up, I grew up in a house where, of course, we've had our own struggles, but in comparison to, I don't have a colonial experience as many of my friends do. And so when we do these presentations, it's, really important that we do situate ourselves and recognize, those places and spaces that we come from. So I would never, want to speak on behalf of somebody who has those experiences. And also, I live and work in Southern Ontario, which is very, very different than, say, Northern Ontario. And Tisa and I have had lots of conversations around this. And so, of course, and even right into locally our local communities, what communities are around us and where we work is going to shape and reflect our work experiences as well. So, Kevin, do you want to? Kevin's the quiet one. He'll talk later, so I guess I'm introducing him on his behalf to the group. But he's so together we are with our 5 girls, and he's a math educator and has worked for nearly a decade as a math consultant and is now back in the classroom. And so he's going to be, and he's also our tech expert, and he's going to be showcasing, how we utilize this in an online environment. But anyway, so I co-chair our organization. I work as the Indigenous Education Lead for Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board. And part of that work is connected into leading a provincial community of practice in Indigenous knowledge and mathematics, which connects us into the Math Knowledge Network. And that has led to some really cool partnerships and projects that involve NASA and Indigenous educators from all over the world, which include Maori from New Zealand, Navajo Nation, and more. So very important work that we're doing, and exciting work as well.
Thanks, Jody. So one of the foundational pieces, I think, as educators working with Indigenous education, is that we have to be considerate of the worldview of Indigenous people. In Okanagan, which would be the closest translation in Anishinaabemowin, in the Ojibwe language, to what would be worldview. And I can't see the literal translation, but the translation generally would be the rules of, or the laws of, relationship with the land. And that is critical to understanding Indigenous relationships, or Indigenous understandings of relationship with the land in Okanagan. And so I am, I'm quite fortunate that I'm able to use this this example as a as a teachable moment, I guess, and talking about, you know, not going to go. And so, as an educator, when we talk about our relationship as a in my work currently as a Catholic educator, our relationship with God, our Creator, um, you know, we cannot possibly give away parts of God, um, as we understand through Catholic education what God is. As Anishinaabe people, the same understanding exists where um, we cannot possibly give away, uh, you know, parts of Mother Earth. Mother Earth is comparable and is equal to the Creator, and we give thanks to both of them for giving us life. And so we cannot give away either of them because we could not possibly own them. And so that is critically important to our um, our awareness of Indigenous peoples and their relationship to the land in Okanagan. And so, what is the rule of our relationship or the laws of our relationship with the land? So, um, it's not possible to give away parts of our Creator, and so that is foundational of relationships, and it really gives us a better understanding of the misinterpretation that happened with the treaties and um, the English translation of treaty and the transferring of land or the sharing of land that happened during the treaty process. So, um, really critical to our awareness as educators. Thanks, Jody.
I just realized I was on mute there. So what I was seeing was this video is just another way of demonstrating what Tisa was talking about. And it's commentary by Isaac Murdoch and Jerry Ottawajuan. And so I put the link into the chat box for you there to have reference for if you want to take a look at that later. So in talking about this resource that we're going to be diving into, one of the things that we always try and do is look for as many cross-curricular connections as possible. And so we really emphasize also leaning on the inquiry process when diving into an area that for a lot of educators are very unfamiliar with. And so, of course, there's a lot of apprehension that comes with bringing in Indigenous education into the classroom. But inquiry is your best friend when approaching this topic, and really removing yourselves as being the person at the front of the classroom who has to have all the answers. So to go on a co-learning journey with your students, it also invites them to take more risks in the classroom if they see you as a co-learner instead of the idea that you are, the master of all knowledge and knowing of all things. And Indigenous knowledge itself is also it's holistic in nature. So it's not like how we do school where we've separated, and this is more, you know, particularly in secondary, where we've isolated the subjects. Indigenous knowledge is everything is intertwined with everything. And so when you're learning, you're taking in mathematical concepts, geography, science, all of those pieces are all interwoven. And so it's just better, you know, when we look at pedagogical practice in the classroom to approach learning this way. So I'm going to turn it over to Tisa, and she's going to talk a little bit about how this resource came to be, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jody. So we were very fortunate to have received a grant. The Ministry of Education a couple of years ago, I guess 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, and to support the revised or enhanced curriculum that came out for grades 4 to 6 social studies, grades 7 and 8 and 10 history. And so different groups were encouraged to put in a proposal um, for a resource development for um, different grades and curriculum support. And so the First Nation Métis Inuit Education Association, we we successfully received a grant that would support specifically grades 4 and 5, um, revised. I prefer to call it enhanced curriculum because there was more of an enhancement where it was there were points that were specifically um, uh, created to include Indigenous peoples. And fortunately, I was included. I was involved in the rewriting or the writing of that revised or enhanced curriculum. And so it wasn't that we rewrote the curriculum. It was that we took the existing curriculum and ensured that that Indigenous peoples were included in every year. So in grade 4, an example for grade 4 is that grade 4 is a year that students typically look at early civilization. And with the existing resources that teachers have, we would look at early civilizations as being, the Egyptians with the pyramids, or the Roman Empire, or the Mayan people in South America. When we reviewed the curriculum as writers, we ensured that at least one Indigenous group of people was going to be included in the um, study of early civilization. So one First Nation or Inuit group would be included. Um, so that was the writing process that I experienced with the grades 4 to 6 social studies. So it was an absolute pleasure to be involved in the resource creation to support that curriculum enhancement that I was a part of. And so we wanted to ensure that we included many voices from across all of Ontario. A lot of the resources that are available and have been created are quite southern centric. Groups south of, our Indigenous people south of Sudbury or Sault Ste. Marie. And so it was our intention to make sure that we traveled north of that to ensure that we captured the voices and experiences and knowledge of Indigenous peoples from areas that were not we're different from larger urban settings like Toronto. So we did travel to three First Nations communities. We do this resource captures the knowledge and profiles the knowledge. I can't say captures, but profiles the knowledge from different knowledge holders from four First Nations communities. One of those communities was specific to Indigenous language, so First Nations language. And Jody will speak to that a bit more. But three of those First Nations communities profiles and videos, knowledge keepers and citizens of First Nations communities from the north. So Chapleau Cree First Nation is one of the communities that was visited. Onegaming First Nation, which is the community that my father is from, and it was really important for us to visit that community. Onegaming First Nation is on Lake of the Woods, which is one of the largest lakes in northwestern Ontario, and the First Nations people, the Anishinaabe people in that area, were able to preserve their Anishinaabe ways of being and knowing, and their ceremonies and their language during the times of our Indian Act and our Indian agents, and when our ways of being were outlawed because they were able to take their ceremonies and go underground. And my great grandfather talked about going out during the night to practice his ceremonies on an island, and that's where he would hide his ceremonial items so that the Indian agent couldn't get them. And so Onegaming was a place that was important to me, to make sure that we shared the resilience, the resistance of Anishinaabe people. And then also we went to Kitchinameguzib in Inuig, or what is English known as Big Trout Lake First Nation, and Kitchinameguzib. And that's a place that was quite significant for the treaty signing of in the 1920s of Treaty 9, the adhesion of Treaty 9. And one of my great grandfathers was signatory to that, and it's a community that I am registered to, and my ancestors all come from that traditional area, and they have quite a phenomenal story where when they are where they have protected and resisted the development of their land through physical resistance, I guess, where they haven't not allowed mining companies to come into their traditional territory. And in fact, the Kitchinameguzib, or KI, chief and council, were jailed for protecting their lands and not allowing the mining companies in to stake the land and resources there. So it was such an honor to be part of the development of this resource, and to bring the truth of what has happened throughout all of Ontario into all of our classrooms. Thanks, Jody.
So we're just going to show you right now on the website, when you go in here, noticed that there's this annoying green streak across the thing. We'll figure that out. So on our website, we did have to switch to a membership fee in order for us to survive as an organization. Unfortunately, when the change in government took place, I don't know if you had heard, but all of the grants and things that we would normally access were drastically cut, and so in order to stay afloat, we changed to a membership. And we also felt that, you know, when we talk about reciprocity of knowledge, you know, this, we do the work of the council, we give our time freely, we volunteer our time. So everything that I do, I don't get paid for. And so, but the knowledge that we exchange with and the elders that we work with, we do compensate them. And so the membership allows us to keep doing this important work and providing, you know, other resources in addition to these bigger ones that obviously we got grant money to do them in a much bigger capacity. But so I'll just go through and show you how to access this if you were to be a member, but we have opened up to the public due to our current crazy reality of trying to survive in an online world. This is now open to the public, this student resource section, which I'll show you in a minute. So under this heading here, when you click on resources, this is where it would bring you into where you need a membership. And if you're not sure, just email, and I'll have the email up at the end. Lots of school boards have purchased a license, and a license basically enables anyone in your school board to access. So for example, my school board, we would use, anyone who works in my school board would use this login that's been provided. And so you can go in, and in here you will find all kinds of things, but we're going to focus in on the TRC resources. So you'll notice here, I'm just going to play you, and I apologize if this doesn't, if you, depending on your Wi-Fi and how you, how things work on your end, hopefully the video will play for you, and if it doesn't, you can access it here. But I'm just going to give you a sense of what this resource is about. And what we really wanted to do as well is really bring to life the beauty of Indigenous people and Indigenous knowledge systems. And as much as we also have to focus on understanding the truth, we want to counter that narrative with really beautiful representations and contributions as well. Sorry, I just hit a button on my other, there we go.
Take your tobacco and your smudge and you just sit there.
There was just Chief, and he didn't just look after just one area.
Before Europeans came, the Cree people, like the people that I come from, were up by James Bay.
I'm proud to be from here because of the landscape. Like, we're allowed to hunt, we're allowed to camp, we can build in places in the bush where we can have a cabin.
this just gives you a glimpse as to what the quality is. And we worked with Andre Casabon, who did an amazing job with the filming. And I cannot tell you, like, well, Tisa can probably tell you the hours and hours and hours and hours that went into editing these videos. And
hours and hours.
Like crazy amounts of time. And just as a piece of information so that one of the things that we do when we do our resources is that we provide the communities back with the raw footage. And one of the elders, actually two of the elders now, have passed on that were in these resources. And so it was a beautiful tribute to give back to the community, like especially when they were having their funerals. Andre put together, she went and grabbed photos and video clips and just put together these beautiful tributes back to the community. And so, we really try and model that as well in the work that we do, in that because we live in such an extraction environment in education. As educators, we are trained to extract, go to a session, take away something and reproduce it in the classroom. You can't do that in the same way with Indigenous knowledge. And so, always doing things in relationship, always doing things with community, and then always looking as to what is the give back, what's the reciprocity piece, how do we ensure that we're doing that. So I just wanted to give that as a piece of background information. Most people don't know about that. So in the so this is in the member side, and what we did in the student side, so this is open to anyone in the public, so this is available, and it's basically the same thing, except instead of the teacher guide, we've converted it to the student guide. The teacher guide has answer keys. Now, if you don't have a membership and you're freaking out, don't worry. These guides, remember, this was designed for a grades 4 and 5 level. So you should be able to come up with the answers yourself. If it's not super hard. The other beautiful piece is that we also have everything in French as well, because we also recognize that is an area that is really underserved in terms of resources and support. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin in just a minute, but this is, we specifically made connections to grades 4 and 5 the new enhanced curriculum, but these videos can be used in any grade, K to 12, post-secondary, even for your own professional learning. And they're all done in bite sizes, so maybe, anywhere between 3 and 7 minutes. But it's just a beautiful library of videos that we tried to break down into topics and concepts so that you get, just a general overall and essence as to who Indigenous peoples are, as well as understanding that we come from many, many diverse nations, and even within the nations themselves is extreme amounts of diversity in terms of ways of being and relating, beliefs and values, customary practices and ceremonies, even language, many different dialects of language. So, these were, and then these big key understandings is that these are the big takeaways that we want people, students and educators to really know. And I want to emphasize number 2 here. So what we've been trying to, and I'm speaking from Southern Ontario. In Southern Ontario, it's a different situation, but we are really trying to grapple with what's been being presented, which is very trivial, and we kind of coin it as leathers and feathers. We want people to walk away with this understanding that Indigenous peoples come from complex, sophisticated civilizations. And so when thinking about how you're going to present content, always think about it from that perspective. Am I am I portraying people as this, or am I perpetuating these stereotypes that have always existed, which keep us always in this realm of, always dressed in a regalia or looking a certain way, or, are we just always, looking like we're just doing crafts and that's it? Or do we portray people as being very complex and sophisticated, whose knowledge systems resonate with and are aligned with, quantum physics? So we really have to, so this is part of what we're trying to really bring about. And again, this is also younger students. So we're also not in, I think as adults, it's our responsibility to really dive in and understand the depths of colonialism, which is still ongoing, and become aware of that. But for students, we talk a lot about age appropriateness and readiness to be having those conversations. So we're not in the business of traumatizing students to get these truths across. I think it's important that I think about my kids, and they're going, some have been through the system, and the others are in the system, and what is it that they're learning about themselves? Because my kids are now very much involved in ceremonies and Anishinaabeg ways of doing things, and so when things are presented to them, they come home and they're like, Mom, I thought, anyway, so they get a lot of conflicting messages when it's not done properly. So, but I also recognize that this work is very new, and we're here to support teachers and trying to shift in practice. So, so I'm just getting waved by Kevin. Oh, there's a question. Are these communities Ontario based? Yes, these are all in Ontario. And the question about geography. So yeah, so you'll actually see in here, for example, in this one here, we have great connections to place and land and geography as an example. So I'll just show you very quickly. It talks about.
We're called Kichinemeksib Ininwak, which translates from the Ojibwe Cree language, which is our native tongue. It means the people of Big Trout Lake.
So this little video, for example, gets right into the actual geography, and same with Onegaming. And so there's opportunities to make those connections as well, and look at on the map and find out where they are. And also, remember at the very beginning, we talked about the importance of land and connection and those understandings about how deeply interconnected everything is with the land. And so if you get a chance, in particular for this community, they, the community, the leadership in the community, they were jailed not that long ago for resisting the Platinex mining company that wanted to go into their community and rip up their sacred sites and things like that. And these are the things that are constantly going on in communities across Ontario. So for the older grades, and I come from the secondary panel, like we did a lot of inquiry into looking at resource extraction and the impacts that had on communities throughout Ontario as well as Canada. So you can pick any community, and there is devastation happening due to resource extraction and mining companies. And Canadian mining companies have been causing major havoc all around the world. So it's really, so those are some really deeper inquiries you can make as well. So I want to turn it over to Kevin, because he's going to show how you can use this in your actual online classroom. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and he's going to share his screen.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's okay hearing me. Give me a second to share my desktop. All right, so you should be able to see my screen. I'm going to start off with Google Classroom, as that seems to be one of the more popular virtual learning spaces now that we're in this distance learning reality. And so basically what I did, Jody asked me to try and do a mock-up version of adding some of the resources from the website to a virtual classroom. And so in this one, I basically went in and I created a topic. So basically I mapped the unit names that are in the resource. The first unit is who we are. And then I created assignments and material to coincide with the material that is in the resource that's on the website. So for example, if I go into lesson 1 here, this is set up as an assignment. And I took some of the instructions right out of the resource and just populated them in here, which is really just a copy and paste, really easy to do. And I'm just going to use the assignment to see it a little bit bigger. Okay. And if I go into edit mode here, I'll show you how I basically added some of the resources. So in Google Classroom, it is pretty easy. You click the add button and you can see there are
Sorry, he's going to change his headset.
all right. Better? Okay, there we go. That works a little better. All right, so as I was saying, so in creating the assignment, I basically clicked the create an assignment option. And as I said, copied and pasted some of the instructions right out of the guide on the website and posted them in the instructions. Titled the lesson to match the first activity, so where we come from. And then in the activity, it asks students to look or watch one of the videos from the video library. And so rather than have them try and find it,
Sorry, we have another microphone issue. 1 second.
I don't know.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
I'm back. Okay. All right. So rather than have the students find the video in amongst the collection of videos that are on the website, what I did is I copied the video link and added it here as a link. So if I click on it, you can see it just pulls up this pop-up. I pasted in the link from the video on the website, and then it showed up here, which was a link to the video on Vimeo. And so I'm just going to save it. Okay, and so they can click on the resource link. So this
Sorry. This headset clearly is an issue. Hold on.
all right, can we hear me now? Better? All right. So the second link that I added for the activity takes students into the PDF that has the, I'm just going to scroll down so you can see it, has the worksheets that they are and the reflection questions that they can respond to after watching the videos. And so they've created these so that they are editable. And so students can type their responses right into the PDF, like that. And then they can download them or download the file just by clicking the download button. And then I know where I'm going to save it. And what I did is in later, I'm going to go back to my Google Classroom here. In later assignments, rather than making them an assignment, watching the video, and again, I added the link directly to the video, and I direct them to where in that PDF file I want them to do the next set of work. So it's all easily laid out in the document, and I'm really just showing you how I've embedded that into one of the virtual learning spaces like Google Classroom. It works also in Brightspace, which is one of the virtual learning spaces that's being promoted by the ministry now that we're doing this distance learning. So in this case, I've got a welcome page on the front landing homepage, and then in the content area, I've built out a similar unit of study. So again, unit 1, who are we? And then underneath each unit heading, I've created
Sorry. Once again, there's a weird microphone situation.
testing.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just wait for Jody to wave at me when I'm back on and I seem to be coming in and out. So yeah, so in Brightspace, same idea. In the content area, I created the unit, and then underneath, I haven't fully built this one out, but you can see I've built lesson 1. Again, copied the instructions from the resource from the FNMI EAO site, created a link. Now, the video link settings have changed slightly. So even though it says, sorry, you can't see due to privacy settings, the watch on Vimeo button will still take them directly to the video. So again, they don't have to search through the number of videos that are on the FNMIAO page. That watch on Vimeo button would take them directly to the video that they need to watch for this particular part of the activity. And then underneath, I've created the link to that PDF file. So they would click on it, be able to respond to the questions after video 1 for activity 1, and then save it. And then again in lesson 2, the next set of instructions, asking them to watch the video, and then reminding them to go back and open that PDF file and look for activity 3, and then complete the reflection questions in the document again. All right, so that's it for me. Again, just modeling how easy it is to take the resources from the site and embed them into either of sort of the 2 main virtual learning environments that are being used by teachers now that we're in this distance learning reality. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back over to Jody.
So I'm just going to answer one in the chat box here. The question that started was, what suggestion would you make to us as educators to ensure we are honoring the knowledge keepers and elders that are being featured in our online classrooms? I'd like to ensure students have an awareness of our process in obtaining knowledge from our elders and knowledge keepers. So I guess there's 2 separate pieces to this. Is one In the online realm, it's really difficult. And also, just a reminder, we're not actually doing online teaching. We are surviving a crisis and trying to provide some sense of learning through these online classrooms. And also, there's not a lot of time allocated for students depending on your grade in terms of how many hours a day or a week that they're going to be accessing content. And so it's just really small little pieces that you're going to be providing to them. And so, even just using this resource, if that's the only thing that you're going to be enhancing your online classrooms with, there's more than enough in here for that. And in those guides that are on the website, it gives you a background for the community, who the knowledge keepers were or are that have contributed to that. And I think it's important also to acknowledge that this is in no way to replace face-to-face experiences, because everything we do is relational. And so in normal circumstances, we would always try to aim to invite somebody in, which I see, in the chat that is acknowledged. And when you're inviting somebody in, it's really important that if you don't know the community or the people, then hopefully each school board has a dedicated lead. And I'll give you my school board's process as an example. And this is unique to my board. Every board will have their own way of doing things, just like each elder or knowledge keeper has their own protocol and process. And so everybody's different. So you can't, so my job, for example, in my board is I'm kind of like the doorway between who comes into our schools and classrooms and provides what knowledge is being shared. And so it's my responsibility to take care of those protocols, not the individual classroom teacher. And part of that we had to kind of rein back, because what was happening is, out of good intentions, people were, they would see something or they would hear about, oh, you give a little red tobacco tie. And then next thing you know, everybody was doing these little red tobacco ties and giving them to everybody, not realizing that that doesn't apply to everyone. And so it's important to go back to, again, the relationship piece and taking the pressure off of the classroom teacher, whose job is not to necessarily know those things, and putting that onto me, again, as that doorway person, to make sure that we're bringing in people who are also providing information that is aligned with what our Indigenous Education Advisory Council has stated in terms of what kind of learning wants to take place. So I don't know if Tisa, you want to share anything about that as well?
Sure. So hi, Desta. Really nice to see you online, and I'm sure that I could probably learn more from you than anything that I could contribute to this conversation or your question around how to acknowledge and honor knowledge keepers and elders during this very challenging time. I think that what I've recommended to my own teachers, the teachers my colleagues that I work with, is that for the time being, that we just keep we keep it so that we keep our learning space so that we're not overwhelming anybody, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we decided to bring in this learning tool with the videos and the teacher guide. And all of the videos and the teacher guide were you know, we were advised by all of the knowledge keepers that were part of the videos on what was appropriate and not appropriate. And so I think that is primarily one of the reasons why we decided to bring this learning tool and make it open to public to use. It is really difficult right now to you know, appropriately honor and show respect to knowledge keepers and invite them into our virtual learning space. So I'm advising teachers that I'm working with just to not do that. So and using the tools that we have already developed and tools that we know are going to be safe for children and well, for students to and teachers to be using in the classroom. So yeah, so I think that's what I have to share, Jody, is that you know, I know we did go we you know, we were in ceremony with these people you know, during the making of these of this resource that we're sharing, and they've given us permission to share this resource, and we're so thankful that we were part of that learning, and thankful that we're able to share it with children and teachers in schools throughout all of Ontario.
So one of the questions that was asked here was about sharing with grade 3s. Absolutely. Just like anything, you view the videos first and maybe pick out ones that that you think would, you know, fit well with your students. And also the other question here, oh, language resources. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we would love our greatest challenge. We actually, a couple things. One, we have a webinar that Marianne Corbier is going to be doing in regards to Anishinaabemowin. We, of course, would love to try and build capacity in regards to language resources. We've really, it's just been a challenge because I'm sure, as you know, everyone's just trying to survive in their own environments and communities and within education. So certainly if there's anyone that's, you know, willing to help or you know, put a collection of things together, absolutely, we welcome that. And I think I'm just going to put up here. So that brings us to the end. And so just to share our contact information with you. And also, I'm going to just grab, I'm going to put this link in the chat box for you. Somehow I have to, so when I'm sharing my screen, it does not let me see the chat box feature. Just one second. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen for a second so I can go back to the chat box. So there is, oh, hang on, I just do this properly. So there's a link that also is just a few questions in regards to some feedback that would help us. As I mentioned, this was our very first webinar. So thank you for being with us as we, you know, kind of muddle through some of the technology pieces. It's always a challenge. And
Jody, I have
yes.
to correct. It's our first webinar on OTF.
Oh, yes.
My EAO. We've done webinars for our OWECTA union. So
yes. Thank you.
Different.
Yes. And we do also have a Facebook page as well. So if you're on Facebook, you can find us there, and we post other things. And we also use Twitter. So we do share out additional resources and things like that through Facebook and Twitter. And yeah, so stay tuned for more announcements for other webinars that we have coming up. They will all be recorded and posted on our website, and it will be available to the public. We will have a new space on our website page called webinars, and we will post all of that there. So again, thank you. I'll put back up our contact information once more. Are you there? And thanks again.
Thank you, everybody. Miigwech, everyone.